back to Oath Keepers Hawaii. Today we're here with Mr. Gallardi again to share a little bit about how we can help the folks at home eliminate and get rid of some of that awful debt. One of the worst things that you have hanging over your head ever is to be in debt and have debt collectors calling you, or you can't pay your mortgage, or you can't pay your bills, and the depression and the anxiety and the fear sometimes is so gripping that it actually starts causing health issues, spiritual issues, financial, not obviously financial, but marriage problems. Everything comes when you feel completely overwhelmed in that state. So we've got some solutions, and we're here just today to discuss some alternatives that will help you at home have a little bit more peace of mind. So thank you so much for coming down, Mr. Gallardi.
Well, thank you very much again for having me here again.
Yeah,
it's always enjoyable, and I enjoy kind of explaining a little bit about what we do. And
well, maybe you can explain how we got into such a massive amount of debt, and what, from being the legal perspective and studying all what they're coming up with new solutions for this. Well, where are we going?
Well, that's a real interesting story, and I look back to my first son, my oldest son, when he went away to college. Here he's 18 years old. He's never had a credit card. He's never probably even had, I don't think he even had a checking account. And when somebody sends him a credit card,
he's in school?
Yeah, well, he's in school, first year of school, for $500. And of course, he has no idea what it is. He didn't explain it to me. And of course, the inevitable happened. Of course, he
racked up $500.
He racked up $500 on it, and didn't have any way of paying it. And simply because he just didn't know what he had, or what it was, or the understanding of how to pay back. And it was terrible. I mean, it was a real,
I bet it was a big life lesson for him and you too, right?
I don't think he learned the lesson very well. I think it still never really dawned on him until later, when in his life, when all of a sudden he had the other problem with loans to get his education and things like that. And all of a sudden he realized there's something called there's a credit rating, and you have to have a good credit rating to buy anything substantial. But I thought today we've concentrated these shows on getting yourself out of trouble in a foreclosure situation. And we've talked about that a lot, and there really are, and I'll go over it over and over again, is that it's extremely important that when you have a problem, you recognize it right away and do something about it. And that is either start talking to the financial institution that has the mortgage on your house, or even if it isn't a mortgage, to talk to them to see whether or not you can work something out at the beginning rather than at the end. It causes tremendous problems. But let's say you own a home. And we'll start from that perspective, and then move to the non-ownership, home ownership. My firm specializes in helping people keep their homes in foreclosure situations. What happens in a typical foreclosure action is that the home has become worth less than you owe on it, or very, very close to that. And in some cases, the house is worth a lot less than.
So it's extremely upside down.
Completely upside down. Which an awful lot of people don't realize is that, let's say you have a loan for $500,000, but your house now, after this we call the Great Recession, happened, is now only worth $300,000. And the average person say, well, I'll just give it up and let the bank have it. Well, that's a terrible mistake. That's a terrible mistake. First thing, you're going to lose your home. Second thing is that when they sell the property in a foreclosure sale, the bank usually buys it for whatever the value is. Yeah, for certainly not $1, but
it's a lot less than
usually a lot less than
they're trying to grab out of you.
Right, and that's what most people don't understand. And in the state of Hawaii, unlike some other states, there can be what we call a deficiency judgment. That is the difference in the amount that the bank bought it for and the amount that you owe the bank. For instance, in the example I just gave you, the bank is owed $500,000. Maybe your house when you bought it was worth $500,000 or $600,000. Now it's only worth $3,000. The bank forecloses on you. They bid $300,000 at the auction, and now they get the house, and they now have the right to take a judgment against you for the $200,000 difference. And no matter, and even if they don't, there's also a tax consequence to it, because if the bank forgives that money, then that's income tax to you. If you, it sounds hard to believe it, it really is.
It's crazy because if you think about it, a loan of $200,000, or if you still owed the amount of $200,000 and the house is gone, and you still have to have a place to live, so now you're in a rental situation, there's not going to be any extra money to pay some loan that you don't even have any tangible anything from.
Right.
They've stolen everything from you, and they're still stealing from you. Basically,
Well,
in a nutshell, that's what's going on.
That's a way to put it.
It's a reality.
Yeah, well, it is reality,
Because
but there are ways
to be able to have, it's an equity thing. You have to have something tangible. You know, if the markets are actually playing with the markets and the houses go up or down, and the banks are in control of that, and this market shifts like that, that's still part of this whole illusion of all of this, and then sticks it to you again with that difference of the amount. But there's nothing that you have. There's nothing they can take from you anymore other than more of your labor. But now you can't even take care of yourself. I would imagine right there that's another reason for a tort claim, because the actual living person, right, is being damaged by an entity that's not even a living, breathing thing, that actually took away the house that you put your physical body in. So now you have been harmed in more ways than just one. Losing the house was bad enough. It's an emotional, physical, spiritual, financial loss. But then to come back and do that to you is just unconscionable to me. It's just...
Well, it's certainly something that under law the banks have the right to do. Sometimes they don't do it, and sometimes they do it.
But having the right to do something and making it correct or righteous or even moral or any of that, still, it's apples and oranges.
Well, you can certainly
have the right to kill
look
somebody.
at it that way. I agree.
Because it's really having the right to kill and destroy somebody's life. Kill, steal, and destroy. That's what the Bible says.
Okay.
Okay. So now what do we do about this?
Well,
what are the solutions so this doesn't happen?
Is something that I do, and I'll start out with this. I'm going to reverse where we're going here a little bit. You can put on a defense to the foreclosure action. And recently, there's been a tremendous amount of appellate litigation. That is, when I say appellate litigation, I mean you go through a foreclosure or you go through any kind of a case in the circuit court in the state of Hawaii, and then you have a right, if you're not happy with what happened there, you can file an appeal to the Supreme Court or other courts.
And can you explain to them at home what the appeal is? It's like opening the case again, correct? To have it reviewed again?
It's not opening the case again. What you do is you go to the Court of Appeals and you say that the law was misapplied to me, and that being applied the way it was not fair. And therefore, for instance would be, let's say you're being foreclosed on, and your attorney, or you, if you're an individual, says, please give me all of the documents upon which you claim this claim. And for a number of years, our courts, and courts all over the country, would deny that right.
It hardly seems correct. Again, it hardly seems right, righteous, or fair.
It certainly isn't. There's no question about that. But that's the way the courts were interpreting it. Now, just more recently, in the last year or so, the appellate courts are saying, wait a minute, these guys do have a shot at this, and they're now reversing the judgments against the individual and making the bank prove that they actually own the loan. And in most cases, not in most cases, in some cases, they can. Some cases, they can't.
So now, if they can, going from that stance, what would be the next best thing? Probably a modification?
Well, that's what I was going to say. A modification can come in at any time. And what a modification is, and again, I do that kind of work, is you go to the bank and you say, hey, look, I haven't been able to make my payments for a year. Your interest rate is too high. I want to negotiate a deal with you.
Right. So it's a negotiation. It's a renegotiation.
It's a renegotiation.
Which actually makes sense for the bank and for you, because otherwise you could go into longer lawsuits, right?
Right.
Or the damages afterwards, if they lose the home, they have the option to go back and sue again. And it makes total sense to try to work something out.
Right, it really does make sense. Now, at first, the banks were very reluctant to do this. They just simply wouldn't do it. They almost took the position that it was morally corrupt to do that.
For who?
Yeah, I know for them. It's really
for
funny.
The fake dead entity that's not a human being.
I've been in this business for decades, and for many years I can remember doing collection work for banks, and if you didn't pay what you owed the bank, you sometimes it was a moral issue, not only a financial issue, but a moral issue. You were a bad person.
Well, let's go back to that, because I think that's a lot of the stigma that's left over to today with a lot of people who are very hard workers, and they are trying to do the best they can. They're serving God, they're serving their community, they're doing they're trying the best they can. And by whatever you want to call it, the powers that be, acts of God, the economy shifts, things change, what have you, or the whole thing, in my mind, a lot of this was pre-designed to basically have this happen. But at the same time, that's my opinion, but some people could just say that it happened. No matter what, we can say it happened, because since 2008,
it's here.
It's a reality.
It's a
so, being that now we're having a consciousness shift about the banks going from judging that the people are immoral, but if it's a legitimate, realistic, and you can't squeeze blood from a turnip, then it makes absolutely no sense, because again, now you're throwing it, if it's a whole family, especially most people who own a house, they own a whole family, right? It's a whole family.
That's true.
So now you're damaging psychologically, physically, spiritually, emotionally, everything, that's the entire group of beings, and they're putting them in a position that they can't really make it in the world. So what happens then? I mean, that to me, this is where the banks never thought about any of this, but certainly the state ends up with a problem, because now they have all these people living in the beach or the mountains or hiding out in the shrubs because there's nowhere for them to go.
Or even renting, but just barely making
Oh, absolutely, because the rents are as high as the
ahead.
mortgages, right? They can't, it's just survival, that's not living.
Well, luckily, the federal government, more than a century ago, did come up with an idea. There was an idea years ago that there was a moral issue involved in not paying your debt, and there was things called debtor's prison.
Right, I heard about that.
And you could actually go to jail until you paid the bill.
But how do you pay the bill when you're in jail?
Well, obviously, in today's...
You could never do it.
You can't
You'd die
do it.
in
I mean,
there.
that's just the way
Right,
it
I
was.
think they get 25 cents an hour or something, and you owe $1 million. You'll die in there.
Yeah, I
It's
really don't
insanity.
know. I've never been in jail myself.
It's just
so-
insanity. It's
But
insanity.
it is. But they did come up. The federal government came up with a remedy, and again, it can be. We're basically talking about mortgages here, but and I can explain it to individual debt too. Is they did come up with what we call the bankruptcy code, and
Which is supposed to be for a fresh start, is that correct?
that's exactly right. In
Okay.
other words, it just will end
Alleviate some of the pain.
It alleviate everything. You will not owe anything. You will also not have any assets, though.
But at least you're not carrying this back of rocks
Right.
around on your back trying to get restarted, and you're back into that place of, when you're in such high anxiety, you can't really function well in anything you do, and your body breaks down, you get sick, and then you're useless for nothing. So it doesn't serve society at all.
No, it doesn't. But the bankruptcy code does. It does a really good
that's
deal.
good.
It's become highly specialized, and the bankruptcy code, people have, or the bankruptcy bar and the bankruptcy judges have determined that, this is not punitive, but it's fair enough. We still need to know what you owe.
Right.
And we call that basic bankruptcy at Chapter 7.
Okay.
And that is where basically you go into the court. Normally you have a lawyer and pay him money. A lot of people go, how can I, if I'm broke, I can't go and pay a lawyer money. And it can be done yourself. It's very, very hard to do yourself, but it can be. And basically what happens is you you go to the court, you file a petition, you tell the court what your debts are, you tell the courts what you owe, you tell the courts that I paid, that I filed my taxes, not paid my taxes, but filed my taxes, and this is how much I owe. And then you go to the court, and the court basically takes they appoint what we call a trustee. And the trustee takes your assets, whatever they may be, and in most cases it's almost nothing. At least for the individual, it's usually not very much. So that then you comply with the court, what the court says, and all of your debt is erased, and you get to start over again. Now, some of your debt doesn't get erased. Okay, none of your taxes get erased. None of your school loans get attached. And as I recall, I think there are a certain amount of other government loans that you cannot get rid of through bankruptcy. But it works, and it does allow.
Mostly really good for the credit card debt, from what I understand.
It's credit card debt.
Medical too?
Well, medical is a big one
that you can
you could get, or
and
let's
medical
say,
sometimes kills people with a medical, outstanding debt. I mean, they get well, and then they see the bill, and they almost have a heart attack and die again.
Well, what's happened, of course, now is the cost of health care now is just recently, it just went up another
I just was watching
45% or whatever it is. It's
They just
going,
had this conversation on Fox News last night with the Obamacare, and people are freaking out because it's getting so expensive, and all of what they promised is not coming true. It's all lies, and
it's really a shame, and it's hurting the middle class the most. I mean, it's really. I know now I pay $1,200 a month for
yourself and your wife.
Just for me.
Oh my gosh.
$2,400 for my wife and me.
Wow.
No, that's the top of the, that's a really,
best insurance.
I mean, the best, you can't get any better. But for most people, if you get a 25% increase in your health care, well, we've kind of gone aside here. So anyway, you have this Chapter 7. Now, let's drop back and say, wait a minute, I need to get rid of just some debt.
Right.
I don't want to get rid of it all.
Right.
For instance, I want to keep my house.
Right.
Maybe I owe a little bit on a car, or maybe I have some other asset that it means much to me.
Or it may destroy your life so much if you lose that you can't get back. So you have to retain that to keep going forward.
Well, that
makes sense, right? Yeah. That's the Chapter 13.
That's the Chapter 13, and the Chapter 13 is the same thing. They have a trustee now. With Chapter 13, it's a trustee. It's the same trustee for every Chapter 13, and we have a fine group of people in the U.S. Trustee's office. I can't tell you how good I really think they, because they are good. But what you can do is the debt that you owe on your house that is in arrears, we may be able to just push that off.
To the back end of the loan.
To the back end of the loan.
Goes along with the modification?
It's completely different.
It's
different. It's not the same.
So this is a whole other option.
It's a whole other option.
That's great. Okay.
Okay, and so you can then pay the debts that you want to keep. you can pay all or part of it depending on how the plan goes.
So that's the plan is what they make up the new monthly,
No, right.
the amount you'll be able to commit to that you think you can take care of each
Right.
month in a more comfortable manner.
In a more comfortable manner.
So what do they kind of bundle all the debt and say, this is what you're going to pay
They
per
don't
month?
actually bundle it. They make, it's a little more specific than
Okay.
that. But that's, you can use bundling, I guess, as a
Well,
way.
what I guess I meant to say is that they come up with all the different debts, put them together and say, we're going to afford this lump sum, you're committing to this amount per
Right.
month to cover the different various
Right.
things.
And
Okay.
you may not have to pay the whole sum. You may be able to pay quite a bit less than the whole sum.
Oh, that's good.
For corporations and stuff, we have something called Chapter 11, which I'm not going to get into here, which allows many businesses to stay into.
Well, actually, you should talk a little bit about it because there are many small businesses, and well, large and small in Oahu, that have struggled with their business stuff just as much to try to stay in business with this
Right.
bad economy as the homeowners. So that is not, and you do Chapter 11 as well.
No,
Okay, you don't.
that's a
Okay.
specialty that I do not do.
Okay,
Cha-
but you
Chapter
probably have
11s
friends
are-
that you can refer to.
Oh,
I'm
sure. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Well, I can get you right to the people that want to
Okay.
do that. So.
Okay.
But anyway, because we're continuing through with Chapter 11, you can restructure the debt that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to kind of keep this really easy, but because it does get a little complicated.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But it allows you maybe to keep your home or a car.
This is
Or-
Chapter 13, not 11, so.
This is this is Chapter 13. And it's really, really helpful. I mean, people shouldn't be afraid to think about it. And sometimes we put them all together. Sometimes we get in, quite often, and what I do now is we get into the defense. We actually, as the,
In the bankruptcy court,
no, not in the bankruptcy court.
or in foreclosure.
In foreclosure. You
Okay.
start by, trying to force the bank into, proving.
Approving or negotiating.
Yeah,
Okay.
right, negotiating it. And then.
Can't move on that, you move over to do the
That's right,
bankruptcy.
and sometimes you'll actually can file a Chapter 7 to get rid of all the extra debt, let that run out, and then you can file a Chapter 13.
Ah.
I mean, to take care of the secured debt that you want. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, but it really works out. It really works out pretty well.
Well, as long as the people have options, and that's just, again, why we do these shows is so that we can educate you all that you're not alone. There's lots of other people who've gone through this. You don't have to suffer alone because that's the worst thing you can do. And these two sound like very viable options that you're doing on a very regular basis.
Yes, so they're the thing is that what people need to do is find someone like myself, and come in and see them. I mean, most attorneys will sit down with you for an hour and go over and take a chance, take a look and see
what you got.
see where you are and see if they can help you. Now, there's not very many people that do it all. But there's some, and
As long as we have a network and people that if you can't handle things that I'm sure you have reputable people, you won't send them to people you wouldn't trust yourself. So it's always good to even have a referral because if you're looking for people out there, anybody who goes through law school, whether they have a conscience or not, can say I'm an attorney. Right, and
Pardon?
Anybody who goes through law school passes the bar. It doesn't necessarily mean they have a conscience and they're really caring for you.
Yeah.
And
Well-
that's part of why relationship. It's so important because it's more you're putting your life, but you're putting your financial life, which really controls your well-being, in someone's hands.
Yes.
And I've heard, and this has happened, I've sent Mr. Ghilardi several people that have seen the show, called us up, and had hired one or two local attorneys and let their case just get a huge mess. And time they reach us, then they're inheriting an even bigger mess. Not that it can't be fixed, but it's easier if you start off with the right person when you first get that letter
Right.
before you get into the hot water and have to undo or unravel all the mess that's been done.
Right. And it's very complicated. And, for instance, we were talking about loan modifications. The loan modifications you would think would be really easy to do. Well, that's not the case. The problem is that for the banks, first thing, until just a few years ago, they had nobody in the banks
To actually handle them.
to actually handle it. They didn't know how to do it. The concept was there. They didn't like the concept, but they didn't have anybody in the bank to do it. So every time you called up, you got a different person, and all they had was a screen with your name on it and what happened, and maybe some notes by some former individual. You seem to start over every time.
Well, can I tell real quick my testimony to that? Because I have gone through the modification process, both on my first and my second, with 2 different people trying to modify me. And I did try to do it with somebody guiding me through that I actually paid, that was a former mortgage broker, as you said, who thought they knew what they were doing. But I actually sat with him, and I didn't really understand why I was paying him, because all he did, and then I learned how to do the second time I did it, I just did it myself, was just fax. I was like faxing, literally. What do you need? We want your income taxes. We want this. We want some kind of form, something with a T. I remember 46 something, whatever T. I was constantly, literally every other week, sending a whole bundle of things. And then I would have to wait till it got into their system. And I would call and make sure, do you have all the docs in? And I would be told, oh, yes, Mrs. Miller, we have all the docs. You should be getting your modification within 24 to 48 hours. And I would hear this over and over, but then they'd say, oh, no, you're missing docs.
Yes.
But they just told me 3 days ago they have everything. So at some point, as the consumer, you're sitting there going, are they really this incompetent? Or are they playing games with me? What is going on? And it makes you literally start going crazy, because you're complying, you're trying to do everything you possibly physically can do to solve the problem, but you're not getting any relief or a remedy. So again, I think having the attorney involved, for some reason, it's the teeth. They take it a lot more seriously, and I think if you were sending over the things, they probably wouldn't say, oh, I lost it, or we need more stuff, because it's pretty much admitting the incompetence which you would take to court.
Well, it just is that, like I said, you're a number on a screen, and unless you could change that in some way, and for instance, with me, I do that. I change. I end up with somebody that I deal with all the time, and you can be a little bit more forceful when you have a lawyer or someone like me, real estate brokers under certain circumstances, because then all of a sudden they're going to pay attention.
That's exactly what I was going to say. With the modifications, with the foreclosure, everything that I've experienced trying to do this on my own, I felt going through this process. I'm just sharing with you guys because this is very real, and it's frightening. But the more I learned, the less frightened I got, because I knew if I stood my ground that I was not going to lose. It's a state of consciousness. But I knew that I needed more help, because a lot of people would have caved. The pressure gets so intense, and the anger and all of the frustration with all of this. But as soon as I had you guys step in, all of a sudden that weight was lifted off of me, and they started taking, well, they just do. They, like you said, it's the degree, or they know you know what you're doing, and you're not going to let them mess around with you.
That's right.
And it just changes everything. So again, the peace of mind is what we're going for. We're also going to help you guys get that, well, not only peace of mind, but stay in your home, get rid of the debt, and all of that good stuff. But we're out of time for this little episode, so we're going to come out back at you every single week. You'll see a new episode on our YouTube channel. The website that you can go to look for Mr. Ghilardi is foreclosuredefensehawaii.us. Foreclosure Defense Hawaii, or I'd call it .us, because we're a collective consciousness group of people who are really trying to help the community find legal, lawful remedies for all of your needs. And if Mr. Ghilardi cannot help you, he will have a referral for you of somebody you trust that will be able to help you. So thank you for tuning in today.
Well, thank you very much for having me
coming.
on. Okay, great.
Okay.